to these two gentlemen. You can see here on screen. I'm always very happy when, when there are people that take a long flight to present their work. So before we had a gentleman coming from Israel, which is kind of far away. These guys come from US. So let's cheers our American colleagues here.
I'm going to unmute.
This is one of my favorite talk I got from our CFP. So these guys, basically, I'm not going to spoil everything, but it's really a funny story. I mean, there is research behind what they did, but there is also interesting and curious story about their work. So I give you the stage and enjoy. Good luck.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you. Oh. Immediately messes this up. Okay. Thank you all. Thank you for the opportunity, No Hat and the sponsors. A conference wouldn't be what it is without sponsors like this. It's really awesome to see a community come together. And thank you all for your attention. I know that we're the only thing standing between awards and drinking, so I have captive audience, which is great. My name is Adam, and this is Matt, and we're here to talk to you today about our time in a product review cabal, and all the bugs and malware that came with it. So just a little bit about us. I run a team that focuses on optimizing security and making it more efficient. I also run my own conference in the US with several members, and pretty active in my community. Matt, he's been at Cisco for almost over 16 years. Hardware junkie, forensics, malware analysis, and he's the reason that I got into home labbing and hardware, and I would qualify him as a junkie and me as an enthusiast. And so before we get started, just a quick boilerplate disclaimer. All this work was done for research purposes only. Nothing we discuss today is representative either of our employers' views, opinions, and we ensure that every review, photo, and video that we submitted were immediately taken down and reported. This is platform agnostic. This affects all online retailers, not particular platforms. Despite us saying that we are a cabal, we are an ethical cabal. And we're definitely here in Italy for the security, despite how appetizing our slides look. That said, here's today's menu. All right, so first we're going to talk about how we got started and how we formed the cabal. And for our first course, we'll talk a little bit about scaling the cabal and noticing some odd patterns in retailers. And then for our second dish, we're going to do a deep dive into some of our free products, hardware and software. And then we'll have a little, fruit and cheese, and we'll talk about cautionary tales of other products' behavior. And lastly, we're going to wrap up with how to purchase technology safely online and kind of lessons learned. Matt? Yeah, so how did this work? How did we end up with this massive wheelbarrow load of gear? Great question. So during the pandemic, a lot of people did a lot of things. Everybody was wearing masks, and everybody was watching Netflix, and everybody was buying everything online. I was personally buying lots of smart home stuff online. I was stuck at home. We were just getting ready to do a big remodel on our house, and was trying to find stuff to do since we couldn't leave the house and do anything. So I started buying stuff from online retailers to work on my house. And it's amazing how effective postcards can still be in today's society. So one of these products I bought from this company, Treat Life, it had this little card in it, and it said, "Oh, thank you for buying our product. We are celebrating our company anniversary, and if you send us an email, we'll send you a free switch, we'll send you a free smart switch." And at that time, this was kind of expensive hardware, and it's like, everybody has a number, and mine happens to be more. So I respond to them and I say, hey, I got this card and I'm interested. I'd love to get a free switch. They responded back, oh, we're sorry. We can't give you 1 free switch. How about we give you 4? And so we did. And so then they showed up. And this became a really interesting deal because Treat Life had this kind of relationship they were wanting to establish with people. It was, hey, you as a customer, you go buy it, and then you send a screenshot of your receipt to the company, and then they will refund you via PayPal, and they may ask for a review, but Treat Life didn't force you to write a review. They would just say, maybe you consider writing a review, and maybe you'll help us get our product to trend on retailers. So they were trying to drive people buying it, and sometimes they would say, please don't go to the link for the product. Please do a search for smart home switch and then click and buy. So we would buy it, send them the screenshot, they would refund it, and then a few weeks later they would send another email. Hey, we have a new product. We'd like you to be a VIP and sample. And so this cycle went on and on over a few weeks. So, but then it comes back to, well, what about more? How do we get this to scale? I have a whole house I have to set up. And doing one at a time doesn't work for me. So think like a hacker. So what do? We start interacting. I started interacting with Treat Life with a couple different email addresses. Like I would buy it with a different retailer account, and I would send both of my screenshots in separate emails, and they would refund both orders. I'm like, oh, what if I had more email addresses and I could just buy more and do more? So I got to be careful. Like, what if they notice, and what if they stop working with me? But do you think they noticed? They did not. Not at all. So it scaled significantly. And this is a little bit of what we got. There was a lot of stuff. So lots of smart home stuff, lots of cameras, vacuum cleaner, that's a big one, the vacuum map at the top, projectors, LED strips, lots of microcontrolled devices, lots of stuff. It was great.
And this is where I come into the story because friends were jealous, specifically me. I was jealous. Matt was telling me, hey, dude, I got all this free stuff. Like, look at all this free gear. And I said, damn it, like, how can I get some of this free stuff? And so he started replying to the people, can I refer one of my friends? And some of them said yes right away. And so he would refer them to me, and then they would email me. Others never replied. And so Matt started forwarding me their emails, and I would change, body headers, etc., and reply to them pretending to be Matt still. But we soon noticed that they didn't really care who responded. Like, not at all. This is a huge bank of people sending out the emails. They don't care if you respond or not. Not only did they not care, we realized they didn't even look at who they were sending stuff to. So this is where we started forming the Cabal. All right, and the Cabal was essentially a group of people, home labbers, people interested in hardware and free stuff. And we said, okay, we're gonna start just telling everyone when we have an invite for something. We could say, hey, I got an offer for a vacuum. Does anyone want me to forward that to them? And somebody might say, like, no thanks, I've got 2 already. Somebody else might say, yes, you forward it to them. And they just reply to the email as if it was sent to them in the first place. Here's a real example of Matt getting an email from somebody telling him that he was a Victure VIP. And because of his VIP status, they wanted him to go review their product, and they would send it to him for free. And so Matt forwarded it to me, and I just replied, Victure VIP here, I'm interested, and I got it. So that really started to escalate. This is Victure right here. This is just like a sampling of the emails I started getting. And then the next one is 8min. That's how many I got from 8min. And then our favorite was Treat Life, right? I mean, Treat Life was one of our favorites, but they sent us so much junk. And, we get these emails, and so we go and get the products.
All right. But what about the stuff?
yeah, but what about this stuff?
What about
You know
this?
what? Let's dive deep into that with Matt. Introducing Chef Matt Vuris.
Welcome to the Deep Dive Cafe. On today's menu are the 3 T's, Tekken, Treat Life, and Tuya,
Yes,
camera
chef.
hardware, camera software, and mesh routers.
Yes, Chef.
Who's ready to taste some delicious hardware nuggets?
Yes, Chef.
So Tekken, Treat Life, and Tuya. So the Tekken and Treat Life platforms use the Tuya backend ecosystem for bringing devices online, and the application infrastructure and everything uses the Tuya backend. And Tuya is evil. If any of you are familiar with Tuya, you know that. If you don't know Tuya, it's evil. They collect a lot of data during device registration and user profile setup, like your name, your phone number, your email address, your SSID for your Wi-Fi, and all of that gets stored and collected in plain text, over plain text, and it goes into a giant database. And any Tuya registered developer can access that database at large. So it's not like, oh, I'm from Treat Life and I get my slice. No, you from Treat Life get the database. And if you're from another vendor that's signed on as a developer with Tuya, you get the database as well. So it's all out there and it's all able to be mined. And some of the scary things that are potentially in that database, beyond like your Wi-Fi, username and password and all that, is the floor plans to your house. Remember we had that vacuum a few slides back? Those vacuums are on the Tuya platform, and the floor plan of your house will be in that database. So that's interesting. And then also, if your lights are on or off, if you have a IoT connected door lock that's through the Tuya platform, if your house is locked or not, these are things that are all in that database. And all you have to do to be a Tuya developer is say, I want to be it. It used to be free. Now it costs around 1,000 euros, $1,000. So it costs essentially nothing to become a developer. And the way that Tuya does a lot of onboarding is they say, hey, if you would like to be a developer with our platform, bring your devices, that's fine. We can give you some firmware, or we have these white label devices. Would you like a camera or a light switch or a light bulb or a whatever? We have this catalog of devices that we can monochrome with your logo, and you can sell it as Vuris Tech home automation, and we'll do all of the stuff. So they make the onboarding really easy. And where things get interesting from an InfoSec perspective is they can push a firmware update anytime, silently. So if you have a bunch of Tuya devices in your house and you generally think, I know what they do, I know how they work, I trust them, that could change tomorrow. They could push an update that does something malicious. They could push an update that might include a vulnerability that wasn't there before. You're just having someone else in total control of your software ecosystem is super dangerous. So the first wave of a lot of the devices we collected were based on ESP8266. Great microcontroller, very open architecture, very well documented, and lots of code out there for it. So that was great. Then once we started kind of working with them at CCC, Steigerwald a few years ago had a post about a vulnerability that his team found, and there was an exploit that came out of that called Tuya Convert, where you could take a Tuya device with an ESP controller and you could flash it over the air to an open source package. It was very easy, no disassembly, no soldering. So that was a thing that a lot of people did, and we saw that and did that and worked with that quite a bit. Eventually that exploit was patched, and then there was a rev to the exploit, and then it got really patched where the key derivation method changed and the keys were stored on the server rather than on the device, so there's no way to figure out what the key was through an exploit. So that kind of ended that, and everybody was sad. And then we kept collecting devices, and there were some changes to the hardware, and this was interesting because the FCC documentation in the US, when you sell a device, it has to be registered with the FCC, and they take pictures and do all of these things to certify it. And these devices from the resellers and the Tuya platform, they were making substantial changes to the circuitry, but they were not updating the FCC documentation. So that was one interesting thing. So you would buy a light switch or a thing, and you would have to open it up to see what actual hardware it had, even though it would have the same FCC ID as an older hardware rev that had a different chip in it completely. So these second generation chips weren't bioexpressive. They weren't ESP8266s. They were actually based on Beacon silicon and WB2S, WB8P. So we found out they are the same pinout, but they're not software compatible. So that was kind of sad. And of course, they still use the Tuya platform, so all the evil things still apply. but we did find out that since they're pin compatible with the ESP12F and the ESP32C3, we could use a hot air station and just remove the backend chip and put a different chip on it that we could flash our own software on. And since we controlled the software, we could reset all the GPIOs and make everything work with open source code like Tasmota or whatever. It would work with our code and be off platform. Then with the backend chips, there was a lot of research, and a guy named Khalid Nassar and some others, they found a vulnerability in the backend chips to be able to remove the keys that are binding the microcontroller to the TUIA platform, binding it via the API. There's a way to write our own keys to the microcontroller, and then on our network, we're able to address it via API since we know the keys that it's using, and since we flash the keys, the chip itself is no longer in communication with the TUIA cloud. So that was a big thing for a while. It's called cloud cutting, and then we would be able to use the TUIA API locally to control the device. Still running generally inefficient code and couldn't do a lot of things we wanted to do, but at least it was local and out of the cloud. And then shortly after that, there was a port of the ESP Home project called LibreTiny that works on the backend chips, and another software project called OpenBackend, which also runs on the backend chips. And through the Cloud Cutter exploit, you're able to flash both of those firmware packages without soldering, without disassembly. So it was a really great thing to be able to take even these second generation smart home devices and second gen cameras and devices and move them off of the TUIA platform to code that we trust. So it was great, and it was easy to flash them with UART tools as well. We made 3D printed jigs where you could just push it on the chip and flash and go, or you could flash over the air. So it was a great way to get these devices out of an untrusted, insecure ecosystem and brought into local control. So moving on from the TUIA stuff into the cameras. So we got cameras from a lot of vendors, from Victor, from Voger, from SCAM, and some of them had okay firmware, but mostly the firmware was not very good. So a lot of the cameras had an interesting app that you'd have to set it up, and a very not trusted app, I would say. Interesting wording, interesting terms of service. And the cameras had long boot times, and of course lots of them were still on the TUIA platform. And there were a lot of moving IP space. We'll talk about that a little bit, but some in China, some on cloud providers, but very fluid where they were calling back to. Now, some of the cameras that weren't on TUIA, like SCAM, it was really interesting. It had this peer-to-peer notion. And one of the challenges about a security camera is if you put a camera up and you want to connect to it from your mobile, from somewhere not at home, you have to do a port forward in your router or do a static NAT map. And there are a lot of people that don't do that aren't computer engineers, aren't computer savvy, and they can't do that. So there's this interesting peer-to-peer service that runs on the SCAM cameras and on a lot of others. And Paul Maripisi, there's a link here. I would encourage you to go watch his video. He did a great job of it. But the gist of it is the camera itself makes an outbound connection to a P2P relay server. And then the app on your phone will also hit that same P2P relay server and allow you to ride that established connection from your camera out. You can ride it back in, so you can see your camera from anywhere. And that doesn't sound like such a bad thing, except for, one, the traffic isn't encrypted, and two, the relay server it's not just the relay servers themselves that do the relaying, but the camera itself can be a super node. So if you are one of those people who is savvy, you can configure a port forward, put your camera on the net with a valid port forward, and when it calls out to the P2P server, there's a very high likelihood that your camera will be a super node, and your camera will be part of the P2P network, and the relay server will tell other cameras that are in your geo, it'll tell them to connect to your camera rather than the super node, so you can sniff traffic from your own camera and see lots of traffic to other cameras. So that's interesting. But to be able to do the peer-to-peer connections, you have to have a unique ID, a UID. And the UID is on a sticker on the camera, and the UID is also able to be calculated by doing some basic math, and Maripisi has a tool to help you figure out all the prefixes for all the camera vendors and figure out how to calculate all of the UIDs. So essentially, if you know someone's UID, you can connect to their camera with no other authentication. That's not good. When you set the SCAM camera up through their provided app, it forces you to have the peer-to-peer connectivity on. There's no way to turn that off by default. There's no way to set the camera up apparently from the app out of the box. In an old version of the app, it has a local setup mode where you could click it and it would bring up a WebIF of the camera. But the current version of the app doesn't do that. So how do you get around that? Well, when you first connect to the camera with your phone, it'll give you an address. You have to look at the address given to your phone, look at the gateway, and then browse to the gateway, and it'll bring up the WebIF of the camera. Then you can have it join your Wi-Fi, disable the P2P, and move on. But these are all things that I would say normal users don't do. They'll just go through the app, put it on net, and have this P2P thing running on their network and not even know it. So big exposure, big threat service, and lots of things that we can do to clean that up. So every camera connected out. Some connected a little, some connected a whole lot. There's a few interesting IPs, some out to China, some out to Oracle, some out to AWS, interesting things. And some of the cameras, they worked with varying degrees on local protocols like ONVIF and RTSP. The SCAM and the FOSCAM worked the best, but they still had a lot of challenges in figuring out how to do the substreams and how to get things really optimized. So also one interesting thing on the FOSCAM camera we had is it's running the 555, live 555 RTSP encoding binary on it. And it, as you boot up, it tells you specifically what version it's running. You have to connect to the UART port and get into the console debug on the camera itself. But once you do that, it tells you this is live 5.5 version. You see it right there. And you just troll around a little bit and you find that version is vulnerable and that there's exploit code out on GitHub. And if you take that code and point it at that camera on the same net, you'll be dropped into a root shell on the camera. And it's right there and it works perfectly every time. And the camera I had was fully updated with the latest firmware from SCAM, and I had no issues doing this. So one thing to know is that there are lots of vulnerabilities. I'm sure there are more. This is one that I found that I wanted to call out. And so how do we go about fixing this? How do we go about containing these cameras? So there's a few things we can do. You can do a DHCP reservation without a gateway. Sometimes doing layer 3 filtering or things like that is hard. It's really easy to just give a camera an address and give it no gateway, and it'll try to do things, but it'll never be able to reach out. We can also do like ACLs or layer 3 firewalling, or other things like that too. Every camera that I worked with had a UART or a JTAG available. Sometimes they were right there and labeled, sometimes they weren't. Sometimes they were underneath of a carrier board for Wi-Fi. I'd have to remove the Wi-Fi carrier board to get to the UART interface and then put it back on with the wires kind of pigtailed at the bottom. But every camera had that, and it was extremely useful. There's a lot of things you can do from a UART session. I got some pictures, we'll talk about that in a minute. And one definite thing I would recommend is open firmware. No matter what you do to a camera running untrusted software, you can't ever audit what it's doing unless you do some crazy analysis. So the best option would be, what if I could just put some open source code on it? So OpenIPC and this RTSP server are two really good kind of maturing platforms for ARM and for lots of other chipsets and cameras where you can flash this software package and completely get rid of everything that's there. There are some challenges getting it done, making sure you have compatible devices and maybe working through some kernel modules. But the GitHub pages are really good, support's really good. There's a really good community building around this kind of open source firmware for these very untrustworthy devices. So a little bit of more deep dive about the camera. So on the top left, that's an SCAM camera. And it was very easy to get into. It was harder to take it apart than anything else. But this is just a BDM frame with 3 pogo pin probes. You just drop them on the right pins, which you can find out with a multimeter. It's not very complicated to figure out what's TXRX and VCC and ground. And I think this one was even labeled, if I remember right. But it's a pretty easy exercise, and there's lots of videos on how to do that. And then from there, able to get into U-boot and see what it's doing. From being able to get into U-boot, you can break U-boot and then change the bootstrap command to tell it to boot to a shell. Once you get it to boot to a shell into clean U-boot or into a clean shell, you can do lots of things like completely replace U-boot with a package from OpenIPC. And then from there, it's fairly easy to flash straight OpenIPC. And there we are at a root prompt on our camera that's now running open source code. So there's no more P2P stuff. It's straight RTSP. We know exactly what it's doing, and we can just work with the OpenIPC group and the community there to mature the firmware and be a part of the community and find a way to give back and make everything work.
Yeah, and this is cameras. We talked a little bit about other Tekken, Tuya, etc. But these vendors, they were pushing cameras a lot. But then also the other thing they were pushing a lot was routing. Routers, Wi-Fi extenders, etc. And it makes you wonder, right, whether this was just intentionally unsafe products or if this was malicious. And we got one for this mesh routing system here. And looking at it, it was really interesting. The router configuration requires a phone to set up, and they don't have a web interface to the router. Nmap shows that we have 3 ports open, UPnP on 5500, which is enabled by default. It should be disabled, obviously. The app interface, and then another port for auto configuring the Wi-Fi repeaters. The app used clear text communication over port 9000 to retrieve the serial number and configure the device. And the serial number was your unchangeable password being sent in clear text. And the Android application, like if you take the APK that you are supposed to connect with and actually start analyzing that, it connects to a few places. The router, I suppose that makes sense. Number 2, it reaches out to Facebook for some reason. Like, I don't know why Facebook needs to know that you are now online. But you know who does need to know? This random IP address right there, I wonder who that is. I think we can all guess. It's China, of course. So this router is calling out to China and letting them know that your router in your house is now online. So you could feel safe knowing that another country now knows that you are online. So looking a little more into the APK, there was a few bits that started resembling some of these Tenda backdoors in routers. The CGI bin Lucy admin data manager was called out in a few blogs. And looking around and reading these articles, I unplugged it and got rid of it. So this is something that clearly, like, they were, there were issues with this router itself, in addition to all of the other devices that we had covered. And so now let's talk a little bit about cautionary tales of other products. Matt?
Yeah, so I live on a farm in the US. It's kind of large, and I have Wi-Fi everywhere, like across 60 acres. And so over time, I didn't notice this one day. It wasn't like, oh, I did this and then this started. It's just kind of over time, like, there are these 2 strange SSIDs. Like, and this is them, WMV07FAC. Like, I remember it because I looked for it for so long. But didn't know where they came from, couldn't correlate any event with them showing up. And so I investigated, kind of, for like a year and a half. I was busy and scatterbrained, and so it was hard to really dial in. But when I would connect to it, there would be nothing there. And port 80 would be open. It would give me a DHCP address, and then I would play around a little, and then nothing would show up. And it was a Azure Wave device, and so I thought, oh, one of my neighbors did something to link between house and barn. And when the power would go out in our neighborhood, it would disappear. When the power would come back, it would come back. But eventually, it started to cause me problems. People would come to my house and say, oh, I'm trying to connect to your Wi-Fi. It's open. I see it, but I can't. Like, yeah, it's not mine. I don't know what that is. And that's a bad look for a computer engineer, a security person. Like, hey, what are these weird Wi-Fi? I don't know. So finally, I got a tool called the Dope Scope. And a Dope Scope, there's a picture of it here, and it's kind of like a monocular. And you look in it, it has an LCD screen, and it'll show you all the Wi-Fi networks and the BLE devices. And it has an ESP32 in it. So it's like a directional Wi-Fi and BLE signal finder. So I'm going to find this thing. I get my Dope Scope, and I go down to my office, and I'm looking all around my office, and like it's got to be in this, and looking around, and it's up. It says up. So I'm like in the ceiling, like there's no APs, there's nothing there, there's no power there, like there's nothing there. It's got to be upstairs. And so I go upstairs, and I'm looking all around, and it's saying it's like out the window, and then if I go over by the window, it says it's another. It's all over the place. I cannot figure it out. So I go into the bathroom and I sit down on the edge of we have a big tub. I sit down on the tub and I'm holding the thing like this. I'm just like, what is this? And then I just kind of slide down and look, and it says it's right in front of me through the wall. Right immediately through the bathroom wall in the master bedroom is the adjustable bed. So now, this is the offending hardware, the base unit of our adjustable bed. Now, I am not an idiot, because I did investigate this. I did think that could be it from the beginning, but a few things. First, I looked at the order when we ordered the bed, and I'm cheap, so I did not order the Wi-Fi enabled one, because who would need that? And certainly not me. I did not order that. So it can't be that. I didn't order it. And second, I looked at the manual for the bed, and it says there's a picture. The Wi-Fi module is here, and it looks like this. So I get under the bed and look, and nope, doesn't look like that. Not at all. So I just wrote it off and figured it's something else. It is indeed the bed. I was able to connect, join the device to my OT network. Everything worked great. So the moral of this story is, even if you have a product that's trusted, even if you know what it is and what it does, it can still act in very strange ways, and very strange things can happen. So be diligent, be mindful, and take security seriously, because I was nearly killed. Anyone could have driven down the road and folded my bed in half. It's just a straight API command could have just folded me right in half. So I'm lucky to be here speaking with you today, and please heed my words.
When I found out about this, I was so mad, because I wanted to be that guy to fold you in half. As we discussed, we had lots of offers for cameras, and around this time, I had kids, and I was getting baby camera offers, and I was putting them, setting them up and getting them ready, and they were supposed to call out to my phone, and I was supposed to be able to connect to them and view them through the app. However, one random SSID showed up with a random string of characters and numbers. It had unauthenticated access. It didn't appear to do anything, nor did it have any standard ports. I had only plugged in so many new things, so I didn't need to buy like an entire thing to figure this out, and I just figured out that it was the baby monitors eventually. And the solution was to return them all, buy one that actually says it has no Wi-Fi on it, and then verify that product's claims. So just to reiterate Matt's point, this can happen regardless of what you're buying. If you're buying something that's supposed to just allow you to connect via an app and view your kid, watch out for providing access to your network that you don't know about. Great, okay. So now we're going to wrap up and talk a little bit about lessons learned and what we have and what we've learned and what we can do to purchase things online safely. So Matt mentioned white labels before. If you've not heard of them, they're everywhere. And this is kind of what like our offers look like, where they knew that they couldn't even put a label on these cameras because they could change tomorrow. So they would blur them out. I don't know, it's maybe difficult to see from this from the audience, but those are blurred out images of logos because they would just laser on a new logo for whoever needed it. And this happened often. Basically, like a brand would relabel themselves if their storefront got shut down, right? If their Newegg or Amazon or Walmart storefront got shut down because people complained, hey, you're selling junk and all your reviews are fake, And so they would just make a new company, a new LLC, and then they would go jump through all the hoops. They practically had it automated, and now this exact same camera is a different brand. Oftentimes the firmware might even differ slightly, like have different names, different versions, but the hardware is exactly the same with the same flaws and vulnerabilities. And just to reiterate, white label hardware is oftentimes supplied by Tuya, which as we all know now, Tuya is evil. Yes, thank you. Crowd participation? Great.
10 out of 10.
So, I got an applause. Keep that energy up for the end, okay? If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. So always check your hardware that you're buying offline in a safe environment before plugging it into production ops. Be wary of online reviews. Approach them with caution. Not all of them are legitimate. This is how you could spot a fake review. If somebody's giving 5 stars every time, they leave maybe very generic, good, but no detail. They're overly enthusiastic. One way that we spotted fake reviews was exclamation points. Like, nobody uses those unless you're a teenager, or probably like an 8-year-old now, right? They always have a picture, no negative comments. And then, this is great. This is one that Matt found. Sometimes, they're not even related to the product at all. Look at the title. Excellent dimmer, highly functional. These are great pictures of a dimmer, but then the description was, my digital thermometer is dependable and has great value. Those aren't even related. I don't know how this one got approved, but it's approved and out there still. So this is a good way to spot a fake review. When you're looking at a product, keep these in mind. And just another note, like these groups, these APTs of products, if you want to call them that, they're moving on to Facebook groups. And some of them are region locked, where they're going to come out and say like, hey, we're only looking for people who live in Italy to do this. Or we're only looking for people in Thailand to do this. And so not only are they sending out postcards, emails, but now they're sending out like Facebook requests. One good thing here, there are vendors who do it right. This is an example. This is Amcrest. I wanted to give them a shout out. They offered me a research fee for purchasing and reviewing their camera. They never asked for an online review. They only asked me to send feedback to the product research email, which I gladly did. I said, this is a good camera, this is great, this could use some work, I don't like this part of the app. One thing that they thanked me for was I noted that their product image had a red lens on the IR sensor, and the actual product didn't. So they thought that that was a good oversight. The product cost was only $80, but the research fee they sent me was $140. And then we were still able to pass this around the cabal and get everyone free Amcast thing. So this is an example of a vendor doing it right. This is a global problem though, right? It's not tied to a specific retailer or a specific country or group of people. And the people that suffer the most are like local shop owners and public service people. We've been here for 4 days. We went to Switzerland. We did some northern Italy stuff. And we found a few of these almost by accident. This is a local cathedral in Lugano with a vulnerable camera. This is a gelato cafe. This is the SCAM one, right? Yeah, this is the SCAM one that Matt pwned and with other research. But it's just up there to monitor the gelato. And then this one, they had 2 behind each of us at this pizza place. And they have an unauthenticated Topo Cam connection here, which if you have an unauthenticated camera that's actively watching, that's how you end up watching us watch us watching us. So be vigilant out there. Make sure that you're looking out for people who aren't in security. If someone's saying like, hey, I got this great deal because I bought this Wi-Fi camera for 25 euro, maybe say, what brand is it? And have you did any research? But yeah, that's it. Thank you all so much for your attention.